All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy June. Good to be with you all. Thanks for being here today for our SharePoint OneDrive webinar. My name's Jeremy Charney, and I'm the proud founder and owner of Tobin Solutions, and I'm happy to be here with you today to talk about SharePoint and OneDrive and Microsoft and what all that means for you. So, kind of wanting to get you understanding what some of the key features are and how to get started. There's going to be some time for Q&A, and at the afterwards there'll be an opportunity to get a survey and get the slides and link to the presentation and let us know how we're doing. And we'd love you to do that because your feedback is very valuable. Um, let's see. So for most of you, if you're coming, from the world of Windows, from a traditional Windows file server, the picture here, the Windows Explorer should be very familiar, right? You see drives uh, with folders and files, and you have different drive letters sometimes. You had like your C drive, which was your drive on your computer, and then maybe you had, like a shared drive out there, like a P drive that everybody used. And then maybe you also had like a U drive that was like your um, your drive that was only for you. Like when you went to your U drive, you would just see your stuff and um, no one else, everyone else's U drive was different. So you kind of had that world. A lot of you might be really familiar with that. And now that, you might have servers that are getting older or needing to be refreshed, or you just want some of the benefits of what's there for SharePoint and OneDrive, you're thinking, how do I get this up into the cloud? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what SharePoint is, what it isn't, how you do this, and give you some thoughts and ideas along the way of what what you want to consider. Um, so Microsoft's world of what I just showed you with the files and folders and all that is SharePoint and OneDrive. So it's very exciting. They have the world of SharePoint and OneDrive, and it's something you get with Microsoft 365. And it's important to clue in here a little bit. You might already have Microsoft 365. Um, there's some differences with the different tiers that impact SharePoint and OneDrive. So depending on what tier you're in, depends what services you get. We talk about Microsoft 365 as a Swiss Army knife, right? There's so many different things that it can do. You have to, like anything in life, when you right tool for the right job, usually makes shorter work of whatever that task is. But just like, the thing when you're going to look at all the Swiss Army knives, not every Swiss Army knife has every single tool, right? There's different tools that have different, or different knives that have different tools, which it's always fun to look at those. But same thing with Microsoft subscriptions. Which subscription do you have has which tools, especially as it relates to SharePoint and OneDrive. So, and we can of course assist with all that. Um, there's the basic plans that Microsoft has. So if you are in a business basic plan or a business standard plan or a business premium plan, you have full SharePoint and OneDrive. If you have apps for business, meaning you're not using Microsoft's email or anything like that, then you have just OneDrive. You don't get SharePoint. But one of the big things, we're talking about here, and for a lot of you, is when you're moving your files from your server up into SharePoint and OneDrive, what you're really doing is you still have a server out there, right? You might be getting rid of that physical box that's sitting in your office somewhere, um, that you don't have to replace. And now, where is all that going to be? It's all going to be up at Microsoft, and the server in the cloud, so to speak. There's things around that. There's security, there's configuration, there's ways it's organized. There's something to manage there. So, when you're moving things over, one of the things we want your attention on are some of the security features you get, like in the business premium version versus the business standard or business basic. And that could be things that you might need, you just want to know about because you want to amp up your security, which we always encourage you to do. But you may have some compliance reasons or something like that. But fundamentally, the biggest reason you want to know about the security is because Microsoft makes you 100% responsible for your information and data, all the devices you use to access Microsoft 365, all the accounts and identities, all the users and passwords, and to some extent, that infrastructure for managing the identities and accounts and things like that. So since you have responsibility for that, and you want to know where the security things matter in what you're doing there because you have a lot of power with putting things up in SharePoint and OneDrive, as you'll find out. So that's why I want to put a little extra attention on that. Some of you have seen me talk about Microsoft 365 before, but as you look at moving files up to SharePoint and OneDrive, and giving people access to it from anywhere in the world with any device, you want to make sure you know what you're doing with security. So we start with security. And this is, settings inside of Microsoft that you can set. Like one of them is external sharing. You want to be able to share documents from your SharePoint and OneDrive. That might be what's one of the compelling features, right? A little easier in today's modern world, to share a link to a document, let someone else have edit rights to a document that's outside your organization. We do that all the time now with, you see it, if you're doing anything like with your kids' school or something like that, a lot of people do all that with, are familiar with doing that in the world of Google Drive and sharing Google documents and things like that, and everything's browser based. You can do all that with SharePoint as well, but now we're talking about your business. So how do you want this to work for your business? Who do you want to have, be able to share, and to whom, and how do they access that? And what do you want to have happen with those files and things like that? So, we definitely recommend spending a little time with these screens and with someone who knows what they're talking about to walk you through that conversation. Make sure you've got what you need around security. We also recommend backing up what's in 365. Yeah, you have Microsoft, you're putting out, that's all your eggs in one basket kind of a thing. And yeah, they have service level agreements, and they're a big company, and you want to assume everything's going to be great. And there's things that they're going to do for you and things they're not going to do for you when it comes to disaster recovery. But who's 100% responsible for your data? You guys are, right? That's what it says right in the Microsoft shared responsibility policy. So we also recommend backing up whatever data you put up in SharePoint and OneDrive. So what is SharePoint? What is SharePoint? A lot of you are here, you think SharePoint, you just think documents, but it's way more than that. And really, it didn't start off with documents, I don't think, even as well, it might have been a core feature, but it's so much more than that. So back to the the go-go days of the 1990s and early 2000s, people talking about intranets, right? Everyone was going to have an internal web server inside their organization that they could get to, and that would have the news of the day and information you needed to share and documents and pictures and calendars and like a hub for everything. And those systems exist. People still want to use those kinds of systems, and that's exactly what SharePoint is. So it's a website. It's a bunch of web services that you can link up and you can see inside your organization. When it's not a public website, it's not the kind of thing you give to everybody. It's only people that are inside your company that have a valid ID and password in your Microsoft 365 environment. But you can, there's by default, they create, what's called a team site, which is kind of what this looks like in the background, for sharing news and calendar and documents. But you can put all kinds of information in there. You can put, job scheduling boards. You can put links to spreadsheets that you commonly use. You can create dashboards, snippets of information from your accounting system, a dashboard of how sales are for the month, things like that, and put them all in one place. and put it all inside of SharePoint. And then you can see that from any web browser or your phone. Um, so it's kind of a neat thing, but that's not, we're going to dive, that's about as much as we're going to dive into those other features of SharePoint. Today, we're really focusing on the documents and feature of that. And that's one of the things that it has, right? Documents. So SharePoint lets you store things like pictures, calendars, lists, links, and whatever. One of the things they let you store is documents. And so when people talk about storing documents in SharePoint, that is what they mean. So where does SharePoint store those things? It stores them in what are called document libraries. So at every SharePoint site that you create, because you can have lots, you can create multiple SharePoint sites, um, is whenever you create a SharePoint site, by default, it creates a single document library. So, almost all of you, if you have Microsoft 365, already have a default SharePoint site set up for you. It may be different depending on when you set up your Microsoft 365 environment, because Microsoft has evolved SharePoint over time in terms of how it looks and functions a bit. They have called it a legacy or a classic mode versus their modern SharePoint system. But either way, you would have some kind of a basic SharePoint site with a document library. And that's usually set up for just everyone in your organization to be able to put files in and retrieve files, and that's about it. Which may be all you need. That's you don't know. That's one of the things we want you to go through is think about where you're going to be putting your files and how that goes. So the some people, you can create multiple document libraries. I'm sorry, you can create multiple document libraries inside a SharePoint site. And one of the things that's nice about that is it's better for security. It's a little easier on security. So you might create a different document library, one for each department. You might say, here's our HR document library, our sales document library, our finance document library. You get the point. And setting up security around those is it's a little more secure in terms of being more granular. And you want to be thinking about security of documents that you might be moving up into SharePoint. Do you want to keep doing security the way you were doing it on your file server now? Or are some things you actually want to start to tighten up? Is now the opportunity to clean up that, you know, uh, current system that you've got that maybe you've kind of been using for 20 or 30 years in some form or another, and it is now a time to kind of do it a different way. And we do recommend with security and document libraries and things like that, the concept of least privilege. And one way to do that is to set up different libraries, meaning that if not everybody needs access to everything. And that's useful not only because that prevents people from getting access to things they don't need to get access to, but if those people are ever attacked in some way, they log in to whatever they can see in SharePoint, they can see it, they have rights to see. And so if they're ever compromised in some way, then they would have access to everything you let them have access to. And if there's things they don't need access to, good time to limit that before that kind of thing might happen. So that's a lot on document libraries. So files in SharePoint and OneDrive. So what you're seeing in this image is a view of documents inside of SharePoint. And it's using a web browser, but it looks, somewhat similar to the Windows Explorer. It's got kind of a similar look and feel, right? You got your things down the left side. On the right side, you've got, your documents and folders and some dates and owners and documents underneath there. Some things across the top, new, upload, that kind of thing. So, should look somewhat familiar, in terms of how those kinds of things look. And but there's no drive letters. You're not going to see this as like a P drive or your U drive or something like that. It's all web links. So if you look at the top, it's kind of small and grayed out there, but you can see it's Tobin Solutions, was it say SharePoint.com, what's ever in the URL of the web browser, that's really the link to what's in SharePoint. and that's how it's referenced, um, throughout. And uh, it's definitely a different thing when people are learning to shift from one to another, to stop using drive letters and get into the vibe of using these web links. But anyway, that's how it works. You don't have to use folders if you want. You can create folders if you want. Some people just jam thousands of documents in one document library. Folders are okay though, no problem. Um, but you get, some other new features. Once they're up in OneDrive and SharePoint, not only can you see them with a web browser, but now, you're not needing to be in through a VPN. If you're, coming into your office, you can be from anywhere. You fire up your laptop or your tablet or your desktop at home, and you log into uh, you can get into SharePoint anywhere you go. You also get new features that we're going to show you about syncing your files to different devices. Um, and Searching is different now. Now it's going to have a different search functionality. So that's what it becomes. You kind of move from one world to this world. Um, the One of the things that gets confusing for people is the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint. And I like to kind of continue the metaphor from your server, right? In your server, you had like your P drive or whatever, which was the shared drive that everybody used, and then you had your own U drive or something like that that was just kind of your personal stuff. OneDrive is like a special document library, but it's that everybody gets one. If you have OneDrive with your subscription, you get OneDrive and you get it set up for you, and it's your kind of personal file storage. It's like your My Documents, your U Drive. If you're on a desktop, you can have it synchronize your My Documents up to OneDrive, and that is just your space. Now, there are ways you can share documents out of that space. When you're in OneDrive, and you're in a document, you can say share it, and you can give someone rights to view it, to edit it. Um, it's a little more cumbersome to do it that way, but you can do it. Uh, so I kind of like still sticking with, the way you'd have it set up not normally, the old way back in the server days of, kind of keep OneDrive for the stuff you're working on that's just yours and rarely share out of that. And if it needs to go into a public space or a public space inside your organization, so to speak, the putting it in SharePoint in one of those document libraries is going to make more sense. Um, and it's also useful, those documents, when you put them out in the SharePoint space, then um, if somebody leaves an organization or something like that, all the documents are still out there. You want to kind of be thinking about those kinds of things as well, how you organize things. So anyway, so OneDrive for Business, and we're going to get in a place where OneDrive gets even more complicated because of how Microsoft named it. We'll come to that in a minute. And How much space do you get? So you get 1 terabyte of space for SharePoint, plus 10 gigs per user. So if you have, 20 users, you'd get 1.2 terabytes of storage for your SharePoint storage quota. Your OneDrive storage, so this is every OneDrive user gets 1 terabyte of just for their own stuff. So everybody gets 1 terabyte on their own. And Microsoft has an add-on cost if you want to go beyond. You can buy it, I think, in 100 gigabyte chunks or something like that to add on space. But it's one of the things to think about. If you're somebody, that has, um, you know, We're talking about mostly Office documents here, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, things like that. A terabyte of that's a lot, so it's in some ways that's a good amount of space. But if you've got tons of videos and photos, high res photos, and other potential things you want to move up to SharePoint, you might have a challenge around space. So that's something to think about in the planning. So to try and summarize it here, where should you save your documents to a SharePoint document library or OneDrive for business? Uh, and we say use the document library when it's part of that team, that department, that company-wide thing. You want to share it over a wider scope of people, and OneDrive is where it's private to you, and you only plan to share sparingly and on an individual file basis. But yeah, otherwise, like I said, the OneDrive permissions get kind of crazy. Another piece of this is where SharePoint interacts with Microsoft Teams. And let's see. So I'm going to talk about some new features of that, but what are some of the features you guys are thinking about when it comes to something like SharePoint and OneDrive? Go ahead and take that survey. See, we got file sharing is winning, collaboration, version history, great. Mobile app access. Close this out in just another second or two. Last chance. Have your voice heard. All right. So those are the results. So file sharing, collaboration, version. Good. We're going to touch on a lot of that stuff. Synchronization, security. Good. We got some people out there concerned about security. Excellent. Okay. Thank you. So what are some of these spiffy new features? So we're going to talk about something called co-authoring, which if you're tired of having to find somebody to get out of the documents that you can open it up because it's in read-only mode and they're off, at lunch or something like that. You're going to love co-authoring. Versioning, we're going to touch on customizable filters and views. We're going to talk about notification and workflow. Now that these documents are up there in Microsoft 365 and you're part of all of what 365 has to offer, not just document storage, but there's workflow and automation and tools and things that you can use behind the scenes to add some oomph to your file management. We'll talk about syncing files with OneDrive. You got the recycle bin, searching and adding fields. That's another cool thing. Pay attention to that spot there, adding fields. So what is co-authoring? It's pretty straightforward. It just means that multiple people can open and edit the file at the same time. So you're not going to get the read-only files. If you need to lock something down, you can. But by default, if you put it in a SharePoint folder and everyone that has access to that folder sees that document, they can go in and at the top you'll see their little icon of their face, or whatever they had as their uh, image for their 365 avatar, and you'll see that they're in the document. And if you look inside the document there, you can see, Robin is in that part of the paragraph, and Garth is another part of the paragraph. And so you can actually watch and see things update in real time and be in the document, which is super handy when everyone's trying to update the same agenda right before a meeting, or trying to get a proposal out. And you can do that from the desktop app. You can do it from the web browser. If you're on a smartphone, you can open it up and be inside, edit and read, and it's all happening in real time. So that is a killer feature right there. For a lot of people, that's worth the price of admission right there. Um, and you can set up permissions on files as well, say who can and can't get into files and all of that. You can use and then all the features that come along with that in terms of chatting about the documents inside of Teams, and you get a lot of power there when you're all connected that way. Someone asked about versioning, or there were no people in the poll said they were excited about versioning. This is a super cool feature. A lot of times we do our versioning by, okay, here's this copy of the spreadsheet. Let me do a save as copy 6, and then go back and start the new copy and go from there. You can still do that with SharePoint if you want. If you want to copy a file and save it as another name, you can definitely do that. But what's happening behind the scenes, it's on by default, and you want to make sure it's on for where you need it. In these document libraries is versioning. So whenever you save the document, it'll automatically track that it got saved on that date and time and who did it. And behind the scenes, it does that. So instead of seeing like 25 versions when you're looking for the file in the Explorer view, you right click on the document and say, show me the version history. And then you'll see all the different dates and times and who did it, which is really great because, while it's nice to have, SharePoint doesn't prevent people from making mistakes in documents, or documents, every once in a while getting wonky and you have to go back to an earlier version. You can do that with this. So you can compare versions, if you've got, the current version as well as the older version, and you can look at them side by side using Office. So it's a powerful feature in there. And there's some even cooler things you can do with versioning in terms of, which ones you show people and what happens to the old versions and things like that. So that's a real powerful feature you get out of the box. So let's talk about the OneDrive application. It's a confusing product name because Microsoft is using it in a couple different ways. So we talked about OneDrive as being the personal document storage piece of SharePoint and Microsoft 365. But it's also the name of the application that you run on your computer to synchronize the files from SharePoint and OneDrive down to the C drive on your computer or on your Mac or wherever you're running the OneDrive client. So it's the same app, and or I'm sorry, it's the same name. So it's confusing for a lot of people. Like, is this OneDrive? Is it SharePoint? So, but fundamentally, and many of you are familiar with something like Dropbox, where you install a Dropbox program on your computer and then you log into a Dropbox site, or you're shared a Dropbox box, or whatever they call it, with somebody, and you can then not only see the files, but you can synchronize them down to your client device, down to your C drive typically, so that you can work with them offline, work with them using your local program, hit them, using your C drive. And then when you edit them, they're automatically saved and pushed back up and synchronized back up to the Dropbox cloud. And so OneDrive works exactly the same way. Um, it's an application you run. It synchronizes the files down and up. And so if you edit something, you're about to hop on a plane or something like that, you can download the files, make sure they're synchronized down, go offline, edit files, go back online. It'll synchronize changes. Um, does a pretty good job of it all. Can handle a lot of files, but there are some limitations. So you want to know, some people they want to take uh, their old server and 500,000 files that they've got, and then shoot them all up to Microsoft 365 SharePoint, and then sync them all down with OneDrive, and that's not a great idea. It doesn't work real well for those kinds of things. So again, we want to begin with the end in mind, and it's it's sort of one of those things that's simple but not easy to get everything to SharePoint and have it work the way you really want it to work. So we recommend kind of planning ahead for that. So anyway, the OneDrive application, when you run that on your machine, the other thing it does is it synchronizes like special folders. So like the desktop and My Documents folders that are on your workstation, you can tell OneDrive to synchronize that, and it puts that into your OneDrive for you when whoever you're logged in as. So that's the OneDrive application. If you ever want to see your files from like your phone or tablet and you want to browse your OneDrive or browse your SharePoint document libraries, the app on your smartphone is the OneDrive app. So with 365, one of the powers and, SharePoint, there's no SharePoint app on your machine, right? There's no SharePoint uh, program you're running on your workstation. It's really just where all the files are. So, um, you know, when you're accessing these documents, if you're not accessing them through the OneDrive application, you want to start getting more facile with managing them directly from the web, which, again, some of you may already be familiar with doing that in the world of Google and files and things like that. It's very similar to that in terms of, what it does and the general functionality. And it's kind of the future, so to speak. So, learning what's here and how to use it could be useful. So if you go to office.com and you log in, you can search across everything you've got in 365. So that means, all the files you've got, everything you put up into SharePoint and OneDrive, you're able to then search in one spot. You can launch online versions of the application. So, if you're looking at if you look at the list here, you can see there's some PowerPoint files. If I were to click on those PowerPoint files, I can just launch them and see them in a web browser. I can launch them direct to the desktop app if I want, but oh, I didn't check the chat here. Um, the So getting to know 365 and where your documents are, these are all going to be stored in SharePoint. So learning where these are, you can take documents that you use frequently, like if you're somebody and you're like every day, you're in the budget spreadsheet that's stored up in SharePoint, you can have that be a favorites link or pin it. There's some different ways you can take a look at that. But, you know, I would start getting used to the web browser as well and learning, where your documents are and how to access things that way. It's also nice and fast. Sometimes if, something's broken, sometimes Word or Excel, something gets glitchy with that. And if you still be able to see your documents, you can just get right in with the web browser. So, we looked before at the browser and this kind of explorer view of here, and just to kind of point a few things out. So, um, you've got the bookmarks here. You can bookmark anything you want to have set up. You've got those are like your favorites, right? So any of these documents, these pages, anything you're looking at on screen in a browser, it could be a filtered view, it could be a search you use all the time to search documents. But whenever you've got that link up at the top, you can now save that as a favorite. You can hit your favorites icon or however you store your bookmarks. You've got your search functionality right there, and that's going to search and says search the library. You can see it's going to search the library that I'm in right now. And there's ways you can filter or change how search functionality works. There's a lot of power behind that to increase the capabilities there. We've got an upload button here. So that's one way to get files up into SharePoint is to click that upload button, and from there you can upload folders and files and things like that. That's not bad for a few documents here and there. If you've got to move a lot of documents, we recommend using a special tool for that manages those, because it can take a long time to move documents up if you have a lot of documents, as well as planning ahead for where those documents are going to go. But you can see some of those things up there if you want to start playing around with it. Or like I said, your mileage may vary. You may find it's going to do exactly what you need there. You can see the document libraries are listed here. So this one, it says documents over on the menu on the left side. And our documents listed in the middle. May seem obvious, but here you can see the different folders and different file names and things like that. This filter view, we're going to come back on that in a little bit, I think, but I want to kind of point it out. So, when you're looking at the documents, when you're looking at this list, you can change what you see here. So you can click on name or modified. You can see it's got the little caret there. So, you can sort up or down, alphabetically or reverse alphabetically, things like that. But you can also do other things in filtering. So if you click on all documents here, you'll see different options for filtering by name or document type. You could have a view that just showed all the PDF files that are in a folder. Even though it's all looking at the same folder, it's the view is something that only shows you the PDF, or maybe it's sorts by a job number or something like that. This last piece, this add data to your files. Now this is something new. Take a look at this. This is pretty cool. So, you've got what's here, the name, modified and modified by, which is kind of standard information with a file, right? Most of us are familiar with that. But now that it's stored up in SharePoint, and in SharePoint, all of these files now are a list and kind of in a big SharePoint database now, you can do this add column feature. What does that do? So if you click that add column, you'll get a dialog box similar to this that says name the column, give it a description, and then what's the type of data that's going to go into that column. In this case, a single line of text, and you can have a default value. You can use a calculated value. There's a more options button. What's behind the more options? So you can get pretty powerful, so to speak, with these things. You can get pretty creative and automate and an automating way for things. But a real simple example of this could be, let's say, a job number. Let's say every time you store a document, you have a job number associated with it. You could create a job number column. Just go and create that, and you could have it, say what parameters around that, for example. Then when you go back to this list, what you're going to see is name, modified, modified by, and you're going to see a new column there called the job number column. And it'll list whatever you put in. It'll be blank initially if you don't have anything in there, but as you add the job numbers in when you save a document, it'll list that. And now once it's there, what can you do with that? Well, you can sort on it, you can filter on it, you can create, a different view of just those job numbers. You can make it really easy to find documents relative to a job number. You can see what a document job number is referenced without having to open up the document to see if it's for what the job is. And that sticks with the document, by the way. So if you move that document around, that column will stick with it. So um, so that's a pretty cool thing. And then that with those filters and views, then you can just say, hey, just do a filter on job numbers, or it could be job date. You can have some field like that that's could be when you're gonna, you know, implement something. And then you can just say, show me a filter of all my jobs that are going to be implemented, in the next month in one of those filtered views. So it's quite a powerful feature you get when you put documents up into SharePoint. That's not something you can do when they're in OneDrive. This is a SharePoint feature. Um, Now, the other thing you want to know is a lot of you are starting to use Microsoft Teams. And we did a Teams webinar recently about that. And one of the big hot topics in Teams is, where are my documents stored? And, the uh, punchline on that is they're all stored in SharePoint. So this is to remind you that anytime you have anything in Teams, it's actually stored in SharePoint. So if you've got things you want to put up in SharePoint that you want to be able to chat about in Teams easily, or find in Teams or through Teams, you're going to want to know, what there is to set up around that. But it can point to the same thing, and you can see the same folders and files and see it all from Teams, which is nice. If you're getting into Teams and using this Teams functionality, like I said, there's a whole webinar we did on that to get the whole world of what Teams is. But needless to say, it's a real 1-2 punch of a combo kind of thing when you've got Teams and SharePoint working together. Somebody's asking, is OneDrive for Business the same as OneDrive? There is a personal OneDrive you get from Microsoft if you're a non-business user, and it is a different, it's similar in functionality, but it's a different product. The OneDrive for Business is the one you get either as a standalone product with a business license or as part of the different 365 tiers that we were talking about before. Thank you for that question. All righty, let's see. Now, how does all this work with Microsoft 365, or with Microsoft Office rather, right? What is their, um, you know very well how to access documents with your current Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You're either opening up the application and then doing File and Open and going to find that drive letter on the server, or sometimes you're on the in Windows Explorer and you're going to double click the file and it's going to launch, Word or Excel accordingly and things like that. And so how does Microsoft work with SharePoint? It works really well with SharePoint. But the screens are a little different. So if you look at something like this, so this is the menu from PowerPoint, saving a document. And there's a few things you want to notice. So on the left side here, when it says save a copy, you want to say, I've got save a copy, but that could be, wherever any kind of save dialog you've got here. First of all, where are you saving it to? It's now smarter. It knows that I've got something out here called OneDrive. It knows my jeremy.cherney@tobinsolutions.com OneDrive. That's my personal OneDrive. Not my personal OneDrive. They named it so badly. That's my individual OneDrive for business, my Tobin account. And, you can see that's one location that I could be saving this to. But right below that, you can see the icon is no longer the OneDrive icon, but it's the SharePoint icon. That's what this S with the cloud is. Um, and you can see the sites here. That's going to list all the different SharePoint sites you have. And yeah, you can see down here is a personal one. The sites listed here, and you have to just basically kind of same thing. Find, here you can see I'm in OneDrive, Tobin Solutions presentations folder. So anytime I open or save, depending on where I do that, it'll operate accordingly. So, but if you're to be looking on the PC, you can still open files normally that way and that. But it's smart enough now. It knows about these other locations that are out there. So the integration works really well. Um, yeah, as long as you're on your computer and you're signed in with your Microsoft 365 account, you'll see and have access to whatever you are granted access to and be able to open and close. And again, it's smart. It's automatically co-authoring mode. So when you open up one of these documents and someone else goes in, they'll be able to go in and even if you're using the full desktop application. So one of the nice things that you can do with this is instead of how do you get documents to people now? You're probably emailing them. You might even be emailing them inside your organization back and forth rather than going to a shared drive letter. Certainly maybe emailing them back and forth with customers and vendors and things like that if you're not using some other system. So, uh, one of the benefits you get of putting things up in Microsoft 365 and SharePoint and OneDrive is the ability to easily share and reference documents and, control who can see and who can share. So that's some things you have to decide on. That's kind of a policy that you want to, know what you're in for, because by default, it's very permissive. And you want to kind of know what your settings are so that you're clear on what is happening or not happening when you've got documents up there. But one of the things you can do is you've got the share link. So anytime you're in a document and you've got the share option, you can do that. And then it brings up a little share link, and you can either get a link to the, type someone's name in inside your organization, and they'll get an email saying someone shared a document with you. You can copy and paste the link and put it into a chat or anything like that. And you can control what they can do with that link, whether it's just a view only or it's an edit, or really you want to actually share a full copy of the document. So there's some things you can do, but it's all possible now that things are up inside of and SharePoint and OneDrive. It's a lot easier to give people access to documents. And that's the thing you want to be careful of. It's a lot easier to give people access to documents. And it's so we mentioned security before. I want to touch on that again because this is kind of what we're talking about. So in these settings, what do you want people to be able to do? Do you want people to be able to take documents that you've got in SharePoint and be able to easily send links to those documents to your whoever customers, vendors, anywhere they want, basically permission to do that. And you could say, well, they could grab a copy now and take a copy and save it and email it somewhere, and definitely they can. But there is something distinct about some of these, because in some cases you could be giving, sending somebody a live link to a spreadsheet, and it's a live link. It's not just a copy of the spreadsheet. It's actually a link where someone can get in and get access to that currently, current information. So there's some things to think about with that. What do you want to have people be able to do? You can set it up that only certain users can do it, or, people can only do it, from SharePoint or only from OneDrive. You can have different permissions for each. But it's something you want to be thinking about. You can have links that expire after a period of time. where if it gets shared outside the organization, that link will, after 30 or 60 days. Um, so um, you want to begin with the end in the mind on this because it's a pain to change afterwards. So I want you to be thinking about that. Um, and we still talk about the 3-2-1 backup practices. Once you've got all this data in SharePoint and OneDrive, we definitely recommend another copy of it outside of Microsoft. It's the best practice and it doesn't change even if it's stored with someone like Microsoft. Okay, nearing the end here. Now, once these things are in SharePoint and OneDrive, now you've got some other tools. You got some other cool stuff that Microsoft has that you may want to leverage. So one thing you've got is notifications. You can get notified when a document's updated or a folder gets updated. You can have workflows set up. When an email is received from this company, put it into SharePoint automatically as a file and add a job number to it. Or, when Billy updates the draft document, it automatically goes to Janie, where Janie can approve the document for distribution. And instead of having emails go back and forth between Billy and Janie, here it is, take a look, what do you think? They can actually chat about the document, go back and forth, and when it's approved, it actually then gets distributed. So you get workflows. You could use that for change orders in your organization. There's lots of different ways you could use something like that. So you can get a daily summary of all the documents that were updated. There's just so much you can do. There is a lot of options you've got once the documents are up in SharePoint. So it's way more than just, storing files up there. It's once they're up there, what can you do? What can you do that you've been wanting to do? I can talk to you about that. Talk to you about some ideas, look at some of your business processes with you, sit down and see where some of this automation, once the documents are there, could, save you some time, save you some money. Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about SharePoint and OneDrive and what it looks like going from the old world with Windows Explorer to the new modern SharePoint Explorer and documents that are no longer bound by drive letters, but now they're web links and all of that. And that's a lot for people. And if you've been working with documents, some of you have servers that are so, the data started off as like a Novell server and it's just been copied forward. I mean, you have a lot of muscle memory with these drive letters and things. And that's a lot to ask for people. And sometimes, it's the impediment to moving to something like SharePoint, or it's one of the things that has SharePoint become like a huge problem because it's so different. So one of the solutions we have for that is a product called Z Drive that some of our clients use. And what that allows you to do is, and I don't know why Microsoft doesn't just do this on their own, it would be a lot easier, but nope, we have a second product and they do a really good job of it. It will take, after we move things to SharePoint, let's say you had your P drive and everything was always, go to your P drive and all your documents point to your P drive. And everyone knows and, top to bottom how to get to the P drive and manage the P drive. What we can do is we can move all your documents to SharePoint and then use Z Drive to create what's called a P drive on your desktop that points to SharePoint, but it looks and works just like the P drive that you were used to. Same thing for like your U drive if you had like your, for the OneDrive piece, for your personal files, or your individual files. We can do the same thing. It's an additional license, but I'm telling you, do not underestimate the dread people are going to have on moving from a file share environment to a cloud like this. Do not underestimate that. It is, if people aren't ready, if they haven't been given training, we haven't thought it through, it's a miserable experience. So let's plan ahead for that. What's the plan here? You can just jump in. That is a plan. It's not the ideal plan given everything I've just said. And if, you know, you're concerned about security and people using this and not getting a million phone calls and things like that. So, um, here's what we recommend. First of all, I would start with a proof of concept first. Someone that knows, power user or two that we can move some documents over, try it, make sure we understand what your environment's like, what's going to work best for you. Is it going to make sense to put it in and use Z Drive because that's really going to be the best for everybody, and that saves time on training and relearning and change, which people hate. Or we're going to do more training around the how to use SharePoint and OneDrive and use this new method. So we want to get clear about that. Get the goals, definitely define the security, how you want to have this set up. Um, and then we, get together a plan of how, we're going to run the change through the organization. Because again, people hate change, right? Most people really hate change, especially when it comes to IT. And what they really hate is when there's change for IT and that it wasn't well executed or well planned out, or these steps got skipped because someone wanted to skip these steps for budget reasons or didn't see the value, or, well, it shouldn't be that bad, or, something like that. We don't recommend skipping these steps. Um, get a test plan together. Make sure people know how it works. Get the basic out of the box stuff working with SharePoint. You don't need to add all the fancy features and things like that. Let's get the core functionality that you need working and verified, and maybe put your logo on there and things like that. So it's owned by you and you're all set. Then we work with you on migrating the documents. We can do that basic orientation and training with you. Definitely want to be there for troubleshooting and follow-up questions, and then, review the results and a decision point. At that point, you might have already gotten clear this is where you're going to go and we're just going to complete the process. Or maybe you're still at this point where you're not sure, but at least you'll be clear. You'll really know whether SharePoint's the right tool for you, because it is not for everybody, especially if you end up not using if you try and do it the cloud way. So anyway, that is what there is to do with SharePoint. Um, it's great. It works. It adds a lot of cool features, and there's different ways to get there. So let us know. We can help you get there if you've got questions. If your server, if you're thinking your file server needs to be replaced soon, and the last thing you've got on it is your Office documents, and you're not sure how to get them to SharePoint, or you're thinking that's where you want to go, let us know. We can talk to you about that. We can help you with questions you've got. Um, make sure you got the right licensing. Make sure you got a good plan, and help you execute that plan so that your team can uh, be productive, in the new system. And that's it. Any other questions? Thank you very much. You will be getting a survey. Please fill out the survey. Let us know how we did. Amanda will be sending that out. And we got some kind of a break coming up this summer. I think we're off for July, maybe August too. We'll let you know. Keep posted on that. But otherwise, hope you all have a great day, a great summer, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks for being here. Let's see, any questions in here? Lisa B is asking about where is it actually? The extra column is probably available somewhere in Teams because it's really inside of SharePoint. I don't know. That's a good question. I'd have to see that in real time, but I'm sure there's some way of adding that column into Teams. And you're saying if I save to my individual OneDrive business, does it update real time? Well, those are two separate products. So there's OneDrive Business and then there's SharePoint. So if you save to your OneDrive Business, and that synchronization is working, then and it syncs it right up, then that'll do that for you at that